All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tinker Tribe podcast. I'm your host, Greg Dowd, and today I'm joined by Ryan Steva he is the Homestead consultant. He gives all kinds of solutions for folks that are wanting to become more self-reliant. So, welcome to the show, Ryan. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Did I say your last name right? Is it Steva or
It's
Steva?
Steva. Um,
Steva?
but yeah, the way it's spelled, you wouldn't necessarily know.
Okay, well, my apologies for that.
No worries.
So yeah, man. We have run across each other a few times at the Self Reliance Festival and gotten to chat with you a good bit. And you're a guy after my own heart because you're out there building things and providing solutions to people that are lowering the cost for a lot of things to so people can get their hands on becoming a lot more self-reliant in their lives and empowering people with that. So how did you start this whole thing, and what gave you like the inspiration to do the homestead or be a homestead consultant and go down this direction of homesteading yourself and everything that the current path that you're on?
Yeah. So there's a longer story to how I got into homesteading. And basically, I hit a major health crisis in my mid 20s. Um, I'll keep it as brief as possible, but because I've shared it quite a few times, but basically, I ended up paralyzed on vacation. Um,
Oh,
like full body paralyzation, could barely breathe.
whoa.
And I had doctors with enough sense to give me some suggestions to what they thought might be going on. And I figured out that it was likely something called hypokalemic periodic paralysis, which is believed to be a genetic condition. But I think that the genetic condition diagnosis is most of the time complete crap. So,
Okay.
but at the time I didn't, I was on board with doctors are, they know what they're talking about and they're basically consistently accurate and, drugs are useful, things like that. So anyways, I kind of started down that rabbit hole looking into how I could heal this condition and figured out that I was being told it was genetic, but people were having major breakthroughs with some pretty simple dietary changes. So I did that. Basically, I got better. And then I was on a waiting list to get into the Mayo Clinic because I lived in that area at the time. And I couldn't get in quickly. So it was like 6 or 9 months later or something. By the time I got in, I had figured out that changing my diet basically healed the condition. But I went in anyways. I had good health insurance. It was inexpensive, and I figured I'd get some more diagnosis. Well, while I was there, I got given information by one of the doctors who was the leading researcher on my condition in the entire world. I talked to him for about an hour and I
Hmm.
had to pry and pry because he's like, we've got some therapeutics that have a lot of promise. So he's like, you could be in the program. I'm like, okay, but what are the therapeutics? So after about an hour, he finally goes, well, we're using diuretics, laxatives. I'm
Oh,
like, okay. And by that time, I had kind of figured out that my condition was probably a mineral deficiency or an inability to absorb and use a specific couple of minerals.
hmm.
So I'm like, oh, well, if you're doing that, basically you're flushing all the minerals equally.
Yeah, that's removing minerals from your body, right?
Exactly. And so maybe it's giving temporary relief by essentially balancing your minerals by flushing them all. I'm like, well, I'd basically live the rest of my life in a wheelchair after a couple of months of feeling a little bit better, is
Oh, wow.
what that therapeutic would do for me. Um, so, anyways, that kind of just kicked me really hard about how broken our medical system is. And this doctor was, nice guy. He really thought he was onto something. He's looking at repurposed drugs. He's not trying to push some, newfangled DNA modification, something or other, or whatever. Like he was trying to do his best. And when I see what would have been the outcome for me, a completely crippled life, when all I had to do was change my diet a bit, um, it just the dominoes started to fall really hard, really fast. It's like,
Oh,
well, I started to realize how much damage our food system was doing, how low in mineral content our food was, and it just, you know, one thing led to the next. It was, well, our healthcare system is really broken, and that's probably because the drug industry is steering it and pushing it, and there's a profit motive behind it that has an incentive that has nothing to do with you or I getting better. And then it was, what else is broken? And it's kind of already on the road of, well, our political and financial systems are broken, like deeply broken. And what's the incentive there? And like I said, all those dominoes started falling. So I started putting some things into place in my own life and just changing a lot of things, and really failed pretty spectacularly on my first garden, and realized that I needed to research. And one of the things that I had learned in figuring out how to resolve my condition was how to look at actual science and read through the scientific literature rather than reading abstracts. And
wow.
so,
So
yeah.
you went down the rabbit hole yourself and were doing a ton of deep dives into scientific literature to
Mhm.
solve your problem yourself.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where I had basically come across some information that potentially what I was dealing with was a uh, potentially a chromium and vanadium deficiency that was causing basically cell wall um, communication for potassium to be able to move between the cell walls properly.
Hmm.
And so then the nervous system couldn't talk properly, or certain nerves couldn't, and the muscles would basically stop working.
Hmm.
So I kind of figured that out, but I hadn't fully gotten there. And I thought maybe, maybe the doctors could help me, you know, fix something, or they'd know something I didn't. And on top of that, I had also talked to a dietitian at the Mayo Clinic who told me that I was eating too many eggs, too much red meat, and I should eat more grains and vegetables, which was exactly what I needed to avoid to
Heal your
address the issue and heal the issue I had. And she's like, "You're going to get heart disease. You don't know what you're talking about, do you?" Um, so, anyways, yes, I had to learn how to read scientific literature and understand it, rather than just, most people, if they even bother going beyond the headline of an article, if they go and look up the source from which the information supposedly came from, they'll read the abstract and go, "Oh, that's what it says." Well, the abstract is usually misinformation. Like, a lot of abstracts on scientific documentation will lead you to believe a certain thing when the actual statistics within that documentation
We're
is,
leading to an entirely different conclusion, probably.
yeah, or at least no conclusion at all. Like, it might be completely neutral, but they did something uh to give you some type of concept that it pointed in one direction. So it's very much like headlines on the news. If you go and look at the news, it'll be, this thing happened because of, and or experts say, or whatever. And if you actually dig into it and look at the source literature, it doesn't say anything of the sort.
Hmm.
It may not even hint at the thing that they're suggesting is what it says. So, but that was 12-ish years ago, 12. That was like 15 years ago now. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And so with that, with a lot of the more recent things we've all had to deal with, there was a real awareness that whatever we were being told was probably wrong. And um and I had lost several jobs, like kind of rapid fire job losses, that basically left me scrambling to try to find something to do. So this was like 2019 or so, and I ended up um working with different people, and several people started asking me, "Hey, can you help me set up an organic flower farm? Can you help me set up a garden? Can we do rainwater capture?" And it's just kind of organic. They knew I was interested in this stuff. And I started to realize that I had a skill set in understanding these things because I had been researching it for years for myself, setting up my own homestead. And I kind of started to realize that other people don't have that kind of engineer level thinking that I do,
Hmm.
or the history. Because I grew up, my grandmother was a naturalist. She taught classes for local high schools as a little kid, as like a 5-year-old. I'm
What
going with the high
now?
school.
What is a naturalist? Let me. Uh,
Eh,
what is that?
Definition wise, I don't know the exact way you put it, but basically somebody who um, takes a lot of time to understand, biology and natural systems, and is specifically astute at studying those. And so she had, I feel like it may have been her master's in biology, but can't remember for sure. And this is, back when women didn't get degrees for the most part.
Hmm.
Um, and so I would go with her as a little kid with like high school students and through the forest and show them these kids in high school, what things were
Hmm.
with my grandma on these walks and things. So that from a very young age, I was introduced to natural systems. So you combine that with an ability to understand how different things integrate, how you can engineer something to work in a specific way and the way you want it to. And I realized that that was something that was a benefit to other people, and I could start doing it. And if I charged for my time, um, I could save people money along with getting them set up in a way that was beneficial for them and for me. So we could all benefit from it. So as just this kind of natural thing that I started to realize that, oh, I could actually do this because it's worked out so well for the people that I've already helped. And I've, kept them from some pretty huge mistakes that would have cost them either the business or a lot more money.
Yeah, that's one of the things when you start to do this kind of stuff is that you will expend a lot of resources where you could have saved a lot of money by not pouring it into a bunch of stuff that, well, you think will solve the problem, but it's spending a lot of money on something and it might not even work out in the end, too.
Yep. Yeah, a good example of that is most people I know who want to get into chickens will go and either build a really extravagant coop or buy something from, pre-made from Tractor Supply that doesn't work very well for their needs. And I don't blame them. It looks cute. It's what they see people doing on YouTube. And I built out my coop and run for under $100. And I think the only thing I spent money on was, oh, what was it? The welded wire fence, the 2x4 welded wire fence, and some screws that held the logs together. So basically, I took cedar logs, did a super rough milling with a chainsaw, and so basically I took the roundness off of them,
Yeah.
um, stuck them in the ground, put a few more cross members on, and then I had some tin I had taken off of somebody else's roof as a repair that I had done. And so I put all that together. It was, like I said, $100 for chicken coop. It's 4x6, I think, on the inside, square foot or yeah, square footage wise. And I keep anywhere from 15 to 18 chickens in there. I clean it out once every 2 years. It never smells, never have a problem. It cost me $100 to put the entire system in. And, most people are looking at like 2,500 by the time they hit their first egg.
Yeah.
And that's not sustainable. You might as well go buy them.
Right. Right. So, have you always had this engineering type mentality? Was this something that you went to school for, or was this like just the way that you think and the way that you think through problems?
It's really just the way I think through problems. And I say this with like a warmth or a enjoyment, but I grew up fairly poor. Like
Hmm.
I didn't go hungry or anything. I don't mean like that, but like we couldn't just go out and buy something.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by, I was on a little mini farm, very old, like 200 something year old house, beautiful property and things, but everything surrounding us had all been turned into subdivisions. And all the kids around me, their parents would go out and buy the Super Nintendo, which was like $350 when it came out.
Oh,
You
wow.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
like in today's money, that's probably like, I don't like $2,000.
Yeah.
So everybody had all the things they wanted as soon as they came out. And, they had the bike they wanted or the whatever. And I had most of the parts sitting around for bikes, but I didn't have the bike. So I had to know how to put that together. And my dad definitely instilled that in me, and in my siblings, that like you can build things, you can make things.
Mm.
Um, you can take the bare parts and put something together. And I had some pretty crazy Franken bikes, but I got where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And over time, I built out some bikes that I actually really liked as well.
Yeah.
So,
So
but yeah,
so your dad kind of gave you that, like, okay, you can figure this out, and you can like put some stuff together if you understand like the concepts, I guess, of how these things work and everything.
yep. And the thing is, as a kid, when you do that, you fail at things sometimes, and you
Yeah.
learn from that. Um, Going back to the bikes as an example, the crankshaft or where you the thing that the pedals are on.
Yeah.
Um, so the crank is made to be a specific length for a given bike. And because I had Frankenstein something together, I had one that had a crankshaft that was way too long for the size of wheels and frame and things I had on it. And didn't think twice of it. Um, and I'm racing this kid around the block, and I go around a corner is my first time using this bike. I go around a corner and the crank hits the ground and I go flying off into a ditch.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned something about, how that works, how you need to be careful about the actual parts you're putting together. And that's true as you're designing things, as I'm trying to piece things together from stuff I have or stuff that somebody else has when they call me in on a project, to know when I should just go and buy the right item, and when I can get away with using something that's on hand, or modifying something to work.
Yeah. 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 A lot of times there's, well, I don't know. Do you collect things? Like, are you a collector and kind of like, oh, I can use it for a project or something like that?
Yeah,
Uh,
in fact, sitting right behind me, like behind, I'm out.
it's
I'm
a common
currently,
theme. It's a common
yeah,
theme amongst
it's a
our.
common theme amongst homesteaders.
Yeah.
I jokingly call myself a bulimic hoarder. So I
Yeah.
periodically purge.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
actually in the midst of one of those. So what I was going to say is I've got behind my camper, which is a non-roadworthy camper that I've turned into my office because I needed some kind of space. Um, I've got a pile of coax. I'm like, because at one of the companies that I worked for that went defunct, that kind of caused me to have to think about what else I could do for work, was a underground cable installation company.
Hmm.
And so they went defunct and they were going to throw away all this old cabling and things. I'm like, I wonder, maybe I could use that for something, or maybe I could charge people for TV antenna installations. Or so yeah, it's still just a giant pile of coax that's going to go to the dump pretty soon because nobody wants it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's, yeah, I collect stuff, and what I try to do is after a couple of years, I reevaluate and go, have I used this? Can I sell it? If the answer to each of those is no, then it's, oh, I guess it's going to the dump. That's where it was going anyways. I just kept it out of the dump for a little bit longer, and now it's going there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good method because, yeah, I find myself doing that as well. And then you leave it somewhere long enough and it turns into trash anyway.
Yeah.
So you just got to figure out how you're going to use it, what project it's going to, and if it's not going to fit into something like that, yeah, you eventually need to make a decision about it.
Yep. Well, and I think the other thing for me is as I become more financially stable and more able to purchase things when I need to, but also have less time to work on things, I start to value things differently and balance that value a little bit differently.
Okay.
And that's an ongoing process. Everybody's got to do that. As you first set up your homestead, the thing is the space you have, you'll fill. And so as you first set up your homestead, being choosy about what you keep can be hard. Um, because you might not have that background to know what's actually going to be useful and what's not.
Yeah.
Um, but I just kind of laugh because it's not a big deal, but I'll have clients who are relatively wealthy and they're saving little, like little 2x4 chunks that are this long because they might come in really handy for something. And
Yeah.
I'm like, just chuck it, buy a couple of 2x4s to have on the shelf. And if you really need a piece that small, cut it down, but it's, it's unlikely, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to store a whole bunch of those pieces um, that just are odd sized or cut at angles or whatever. And so yeah, there's always a balancing act of how do you homestead frugally, but then also not waste your time and space by holding on to junk that's actually just junk.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you started off on your homestead, was it raw land? Was it some infrastructure? What were you working with when you started off?
So I live in a 1820s, from what we can tell, log cabin
Yeah,
that
I remember you
yeah
telling me this story. Yeah.
yeah it's pretty cool. And then somebody did some additions in the 30s. So it's a little bit hodgepodge as far as the house is concerned, but we really love it. And I've been working on restoring and fixing improperly restored sections and things. But really, what was here was the house. So everything's on grid. Um, Sadly, it used to be off grid water.
Mm,
Um, and the previous owner basically broke the deed agreement to provide power in order to get to an amazing 1,000-gallon spring-fed cistern. So the
wow.
agreement for the previous owner was they'd provide power to this cistern and they'd get to use it indefinitely for their water to the house.
Mm,
And they ripped out the power, broke the agreement, and basically, you know, kind of screwed things over for us.
mm,
So I'm hoping to get access to that back eventually, but for now, we're on city water, we're on city power. I'm kind of building out some smaller solar, call it critical infrastructure solar. So basically, it just powers the things that I need running if the power's out,
mhm.
like fridge, some lights, freezers, stuff that can't go without power for too long.
Yeah.
Um, and like heat and things, I'm working on getting my wood stove in. I've already got a diesel heater that I can run if I need to, and plenty extra diesel. So, you know, um, the land itself, there is nothing useful.
Okay.
Just a bunch of weed trees and brush that you couldn't get through.
Mm,
So it's a couple of years of just clearing things out,
mhm.
and um, I did get a garden in the first year. It took a couple of years to get chickens, but we've had to build it out pretty much from scratch, with the exception of the house being here.
Okay. Yeah. That can be a big undertaking. I know you were talking to me about the restoration of that cabin as well, and when you're having to build out all this extra stuff and also focus on that build, that can be a large challenge. How do you prioritize the things that you work on while you're on your homestead?
That is an ever shifting target.
Yeah.
So my wife and I talk about it fairly often. It's just kind of become secondhand to us that we'll talk about, okay, in this season. So going into we'll be going into winter pretty soon. We're in fall now, but coming into fall, we said, okay, what are our priorities? What are the must do things? What are the most beneficial things to us as far as productivity, reduced workload, things like that? And how do we do those things balance with, I work full time and then a whole bunch more. And she works full time, stay at home with the kids. She's a teacher, she's a mom, she's dealing with keeping the house clean and everything else. And so we both have, truly full time plus jobs.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've got a whole bunch of
Extra time.
yeah. And then I've got, the house that I'm trying to repair and keep up on. And so basically we'll sit around kind of probably every few months and just talk. And we'll kind of talk in between then a little more as well about like what are some of our dreams. Because putting your goals and your dreams, recognizing the difference on paper, and then then trying to prioritize them really, really helps. It gets you in the right direction. And for us, we just kind of revisit that periodically, and we've got a whiteboard calendar, and we'll write our goals for that season on that calendar as we kind of go into it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I'm finding that is a key with me as well, is to make sure to write it down.
Mhm.
And, if you talk about it, then it could just stay talk. It could
Right.
not follow through in an action, but if you write it down, then you kind of have a way to like reference this and kind of manage the projects and such.
Well, yeah, and you'll start to as you put pen to paper and actually write down all the different things, you'll probably have to reorganize it a few times, but starting with here are my goals for my homestead. And then from there, getting into writing down your specific projects that you need to do, you'll start to see that one project may roll into the other better, and you should do that one first. For example, I need to do some repairs on the chimney crown on my house because it's super old, it's decrepit, it's leaking, it's causing problems.
Yeah.
But I really want to put my fireplace in.
Yeah.
And so if I'm just thinking about it and I don't have that written down, I haven't really thought through it properly, I might skip ahead to installing my fireplace and not take care of the chimney crown first. And it can be really easy. I mean, that one's kind of obvious, but there's a lot of things where you really should fix the thing or maybe finish a previous project before you move on to the next.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get excited about the next thing, but the way I like to analogize it is think of projects like debt.
Okay.
Right? We can use debt, we can leverage debt, and it can be a good thing in certain circumstances, used very carefully.
Yeah.
Mortgages, you can make more investing than what mortgages have been, interest wise for a long time. So you could pay off your house or you could use that money for another investment. But if you're going to do that, you have to know that you are going to get a return on investment rather than just, using it flagrantly and not being careful about it. So,
yeah.
Or you can leverage debt to purchase the next house, which is now a rental or whatever you use it for. So my point being, if you think of projects like you think of debt, realize that the vast majority of debt of taking on new projects is, think of it like debt, and debt like cancer, right? You don't want it. So finishing the first project and then think of debt, in the Dave Ramsey sense, where you do a debt snowball, right? You take the first debt that you've got, in his case, the biggest debt, the smallest debt. You pay that off. You roll that into the next one and the next one. Because your projects are like time debt, you're doing the same thing, but it's your time. And so once you get one thing done, maybe it's putting a a water line over to your chickens so that you don't have to walk water over with a bucket or, run back and forth with a hose or something. And that saves you 5 minutes a day. And
Yeah.
with that 5 minutes a day, now you can knock out the next project and you think about which one is going to be most beneficial to you, time wise or money wise. And so knock out that next one and get it finished because, for somebody who's kind of ADHD, dyslexic, etc. I know I like to go from the exciting thing to the exciting thing,
Yeah.
and I can function with something not working all the way. So I can kind of, get it 90% of the way there and then like leave it because I know how it works and whatever it works.
Yeah.
But what I can't do now is tell one of my kids to go out and take care of the thing because they don't know how it works because I only did it 90% of the way.
And you need to explain it and take the time to, yeah.
Yep. Or I need to go and do it. And that doesn't work real well if I have to go on a consult a couple states away and need to be there for a couple of days. And now the kids can't get the water to the chickens or, you know, um, get into the feed without causing some situation where it gets rained on or whatever. So yeah, it's finding those projects, finishing them, thinking of them like debt, knocking them out, and then you'll have more time for the next thing, rather than getting yourself in a position where you're scrambling to get anything done and things really start to go wrong at that point.
Yeah. And I think I've heard the term action alleviates anxiety.
Mhm.
And that's it. I guess it goes back to like the original things that you were talking about with your health and how you started to do this research and deep dive. Did you, because like a lot of times that can be pretty, like you can kind of be in a fear state which kind of inhibits your thinking, right? So like how did you keep yourself in a good state so that you could have clear thinking moving through all that?
So I find research interesting, and a lot of people ask me the same thing about my what I think of the state of the world, where basically I think sociopaths and psychopaths run the world.
Yeah.
And they're like, how can you be calm in that? How can you believe that and not be freaked out? And I don't know what the answer is exactly, other than I'd rather know than have my head in the sand. I'd
Yeah.
much rather have the information. Um, and I tend not to be afraid of things for the most part. I also have a worldview that um, I think that there's a loving God who has kind of all this wrapped up, and we don't. There's definitely evil in the world. There's terrible things that happen, and I don't think that's God's will per se. I think that's what happens um, when we're given freedom of choice and choose evil things.
Yeah.
Much deeper discussion, I suppose. But even though I know that there's evil things in the world and bad things can happen to really good people, I realize that there's kind of a cosmic, God given. I'm not trying to um, be all karma about it, but this cosmic balance or weight. And even if things are hard or difficult in this life, there is something beyond, and I believe a loving God who weighs that in a just way. But I also think that he has his hands on the scales in the here and now for those who are willing to stand up for what's right and do things that are just. And so I just don't have a lot of fear about that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I find that ground having yourself grounded in that foundational understanding like you just explained, of the acknowledgement of God, and there's an order, and that we have power within us. What's when you stand up for what's right, that you know, things things will, like, divinely justice come about. And for the longest time, and what I talk about on the show a lot, is being setting an example for others, right? Because if there's no alternative viewpoint of people providing an alternative, then you're stuck in this, like, system paradigm that we're in. And so it really has to come from people showing that there can be another parallel reality happening, that people want to emulate that and shift into a different direction.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it can be something as this is a really stupid, overly simplified example of that, but when I was growing up, my parents had chickens for a while. They got rid of them because they were smelly, they didn't produce many eggs, they were a pain, cleaning out their coop was terrible, they got attacked by predators, on and on. And when they saw my chickens, which I put almost no time whatsoever into, making me compost and not smelling and being really inexpensive, um, they reconsidered. And so they let me set up a chicken coop system, and they're doing it's a little different than me, but it's still quite similar. They don't have smells, they don't have issues, and they can let their chickens free range a lot of the time without major predator issues. And so it's a mindset difference or a change because something was done as an example to show that it could be done differently than how it was done before. And
Yeah.
I see so many people, I see a lot of Christians, they have a viewpoint and they want to kind of beat it into other people's heads. And I'm like, well, why don't I just show you? You know,
Yeah.
why don't I show you what it looks like to have kids who are really loved and given freedoms? And why don't I show by example what this life can actually look like? How, despite my belief that our entire world is run by people who could care less about you and me and would use us for anything, it doesn't that I actually still have peace and power and a purpose, despite all of that going on, or at least in my belief that all of that is going on. And so living that out by example shows other people, maybe there's something to this, especially as we see people living in anxiety, living in depression, unable to shake those things, lacking any real community. You and I are doing this online because that's kind of the tools we have. And so use them, right? But
Yeah.
we also meet in person. That's how we met.
Yeah.
We met, I'm trying to remember I think you were out at Nicole Sauces place, right? And
Yep.
then, yep, for what was it? The solar fence charger class
Yeah.
that Off Grid was doing. So that's cool. I think we had talked prior to that, and then probably a previous SRF, Self Reliance Festival,
Yep.
and then we met up again at this SRF, this
Yep.
most recent one in October. So, like, we're going out and doing physical things with other people. Um, One of the ways I got connected with Nicole Sauce early on was their GSD day. They're getting together as real people in real life, doing essentially modern day barn raising,
Yeah.
getting big projects done. Like, part of why I'm not angry and pissed off and making angry posts all the time is because I'm out helping people. And that's going to convince a lot more people that this is a lifestyle worth living than, making posts on Facebook or getting in pissing matches with people. Uh, you know, or you, I mean, I will make the jabs at Bill Gates or whatever globalist psychopath is trying to do something stupid, but a politician or whatever. But I for the most part stay out of that. It's just sometimes it's fun to just get a little stick in there and poke.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Just to raise the awareness level of some other people too. Yeah.
yep. But I like doing it in kind of a uh, veiled veiled sarcasm, so
Yeah,
people aren't quite sure what I think.
a little comedic in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that's good because it kind of like allows people to. Uh, it becomes more receptive to people if you can make them maybe laugh a little bit. You know.
Right. Yeah. Or what I really like to do, if I can, is make people have to really like just basically force the cognitive distance to the forefront or to the surface where they have to go, does he believe that? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
if he does, is that a reasonable thing to believe? And that's not what anybody else is saying. It doesn't hit either side of get in the frame here, either side of that left right paradigm. And it forces people to go,
huh?
is he a liberal? Is he a conservative? Like what am I supposed to make of that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just kind of fun, kind of poking at that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I found more and more like the comedic side of things. If I've heard two things recently. If you can tell a story and you can make somebody laugh, like that's how we relate to each other a lot, you know, is through these stories and being able to tell a compelling story. Um, you're making a lot of content on your channel. Like, is that some things that you're thinking about when you're formulating your content? How did you kind of learn the ins and outs of all the content creation and all that?
Well, I made a different channel first and then abandoned it. This is part of how I did it. Um, since I didn't know I was going to be doing what I do as far as helping people set up their homesteads and design things, I just started. So I was telling you about how I was helping out friends and family. And one of the people I was helping out, she wanted to kind of start doing some regenerative stuff on her property. So we had like this 3 acres. It was totally overgrown. So I bush hogged it and then we started maintaining it and growing some things on it, planting an orchard, things like that. So I wasn't helping people as a business to set up homesteads. So I just kind of started videoing some of it, walking around, pointing at stuff.
Mm.
Pretty simple, boring videos. But some of it got some traction because I had some water systems that were interesting and just some creative ideas on how to do things. And so I just kind of grew it from there. And then when I started doing the homestead consultant, um, I realized I needed my own channel so people weren't confused as to who I was. And
Mm.
so then I started doing a little bit more effort, putting a little bit more effort into editing and thinking through the videos first. More recently, I've started to write kind of like bullet point scripts and then just go from there to make sure I don't miss too much. I would say I'm not great at telling a good story or making people laugh for the most part. Every once in a while, I'll put some dry humor in there. There's a video I did on planting trees, and I said something like, I was explaining how it's a really good shake the tree to get all the dirt out of the root ball, and just some side comment about shaking great for trees, not for babies. um, and I wish I could do better at that. Comedy is not necessarily my thing, and when it is, it's usually so deadpan that people don't catch on.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I wish I were better at that. I wish I were better at telling stories. I've been thinking about that for sure with my content. But really I started my the Homestead Consultant channel with the concept of I'm putting together videos that are primarily informational for my clients. So
Okay.
the idea was I've got clients who I'll tell them, I recommend a victory garden where you swap the chickens from one side to the other each year. And maybe I'll write that up in a design for them. Well, giving them a 1-minute video that visually shows, here's one that we've set up. Here's the different elements and why it works and what you need to do and what you need to avoid, um, was really helpful for my clients. So I just started kind of doing that, documenting as I put systems in.
Mm.
Um, and from there, I realized I was actually getting some traction. Still not huge. I'm still just under 5,000, but, um, getting interactions, getting views, got some videos with over 100,000 views on them.
Yeah.
So, it's helping others. And that's really what keeps me going, is I know people are getting something out of them.
Hmm.
And so I've been trying to tell that story more, or think of some joke or something I can kind of put in there, or, even if it's just like an overlay of me doing something and like dropping something or whatever. Um, it I think it's valuable. You've got a good point. It's valuable to add in, and it's not the way my brain works. My brain is like, here's the facts.
That's I'm very much the same, and it's hearing these things that I've been ruminating on recently that I've been thinking about it more and more. And when I do watch content, it is cool to follow along with somebody's story, and like
Mhm.
you follow along with their journey, and if you kind of feel like you're part of the thing that they're doing, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
How do you deal, like, do you get a lot of good, like, positive comments on your videos? Do you get some like negativity coming your way? People like pointing out things that you messed up on or whatever. How do you deal with all that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, mostly just by trolling them back, for the negatives, at least. Um, you get so many dumb comments of, "You can't do that." I'm like,
I did
I
it.
"You're watching me do it, and it works." Or, "That's gonna fail in X number of years." No, like, "I'm showing you this because I did this years ago, watched it, and it's still working." So, yeah, I don't really get hurt about it, but it is obnoxious, because you'll get, like, I think my most recent video was on building a mobile solar generator. I think you saw me kind of
Yeah.
putting it together at SRF. So I did a video, I put it together and then I tore it apart so I could do a video of me assembling it. Um, and one of the few comments I got on there was, you should use, a transformer inverter instead of I had used a pure sine wave. um, Forget the technical type of inverter, but you can get inverters that use transformers for your power to go from DC to AC.
Mm.
And admittedly, it's a nicer way to do it, but they're like 3 times more expensive and almost 4 times heavier
Ah,
and like 3 times bigger. And so
yeah.
it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that for a mobile. And, they made some comment about how you're going to burn out all your, your refrigerator with that. And I'm like, first of all, no. I'm using a pure sine wave inverter. It works just fine, and plenty of people do this all the time. Most people who live off grid use this type of inverter.
Yeah.
Um, Two, like, I'm not, I'm not going to carry around something that's 200 pounds instead of 40 or 50 pounds, because it has a slightly nicer sine wave or something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's completely inappropriate for the context and the application.
Yeah.
Um, so you get people like that all the time, who I think the second somebody sees something being done in a unique way, they'll hop on and they're like, "Oh, that's wrong." Electricians are the worst, because electricians know code. There's good electricians out there, right? Most electricians know code, and they know what code says you're supposed to do. They don't actually understand how it works, how electricity works, how it moves, what, they couldn't tell you how to wind a transformer. I can tell you how to wind a transformer and how that changes your voltage, and how voltage over, how you can calculate voltage and amperage for the size of wire over the distance and what your losses are going to be. Electricians don't need to know any of that. What they need to know is, what gauge of wire does code say I need to run? And is there a limit on how far I can run it?
Hmm.
So they're not doing calculations, they're just following the guidelines, which is fine for their application, but it's funny because I get a lot from electricians. They're like, "You can't do that. You shouldn't do that." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm building an off-grid bathroom here that's basically just a shed. I can do
Yeah.
this if I want to, and you know what? If it burns down, which it's not going to, um, I'm out some plywood."
Right.
You know, I
Right.
I care, but I don't care that much. So
Yeah.
yeah, you get all kinds of stuff. I get a lot of great people saying nice things as well, um, getting inspired, and that's what I love is people getting inspired to go and try something, and hopefully understand the nuance of my video because when you're doing something different, when you're doing something unique, you have to understand the nuance to make it work right. Um, it
Yeah.
can be it can be very easy to miss one piece of the design and have a lot of issues because of that one piece missing.
Right.
Um, so I always try to bring that nuance to the extent I can without boring people to tears or just shutting it off. Because people do, they're like, "Ah, that's enough," and they just click to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of the stuff where you're building something, people are really always interested in that. Like people like to see a project go from like one phase into the completion phase and see how all that goes together. I've noticed that some of my videos where I put that out, that people are really engaged and interested in it. They get a lot more views. Um, so
Yeah, and the documenting is,
it
people who are
takes much
watching and
more
yeah.
time to sit there and document all that stuff. Yeah.
Yep, and then to find it all and put it together in a interesting video timeline and edit it, it's a lot more than I would have ever expected.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to ask you kind of like what gives you the inspiration for some of your stuff. You've done some really interesting stuff. Um, I think at one of the SRFs you had like kind of a different way to pump water, and then you had some cool like leaf guard gutters that you built with PVC and to keep the leaves out of the system, and then your portable little solar unit. Like, what gives you the inspiration for these various projects that you've worked on?
Necessity. Necessity is the mother of all invention, right?
Yeah,
So, one of the things you were talking about was water pumping, and that whole concept was the idea of direct solar.
yeah,
So, in when you're using solar power, panels are cheap,
yeah.
especially if you get them. I've got ways of getting them where I can get panels, 300-watt plus panels for $10. And
Dang!
so, yeah,
Wow.
so 3 cents per watt. They're a little bit oddball, but if you think about how you could use them and all the different potential applications, you can start putting things together. Like it now makes sense that I could throw a solar panel, just lean it up against a shed and have it power a couple of fans to keep that shed cool. And maybe that shed is my chicken coop. And so now when I need the fans to run, which is during the day when the sun's shining,
Yeah,
it they
it's
turn on
taken care of.
automatically.
Yeah,
Right. And so I thought of that initially because there's some you can go on Amazon and buy direct drive solar fans.
yeah,
So it's something somebody's thought of and kind of, there's applications for it, but I thought, I could do this better, cheaper with, you know, I've got old computers sitting around that we're going to go to the dump and I can pull the fans out and use those. Right.
yeah,
So literally behind the camera right now is my rabbit hutch that has a couple of computer fans hanging on it with a solar panel sitting on the top of the roof. Um, so it kind of got me started thinking about, okay, I can do this and it works great. What else can I do? How can I maybe even store energy over time
mm,
when the sun's out? So
yeah,
other than in a traditional battery, because batteries, charge controllers, those are really your expensive things for a solar system.
Hmm.
So I can run a water pump whenever the sun's out. I can do it cheaply because I can get these panels at stupid prices. And now I can pump water uphill to a tank, and that tank can be my energy storage. So now it's stored as potential energy, water as potential energy in this tank above the place where I need to use the water. So let's say I was doing, again, just for chickens to make things easy. Let's say I had my chickens at one point on a hill. So right here, my water's downhill over here, and then uphill over here. I can move the water from downhill here up to here during the day. And then I've got a tank up here with water and potential energy that runs down to my chickens. And then the chicken water might have a float valve on it, or maybe it's for sheep or goats or whatever. And so when the water level goes down, it's like the toilet bowl or the tank on a toilet. When the water
Right.
level goes down, that float valve triggers and the water just fills it back up.
Right.
Or maybe I could do this for my garden. So maybe I'm using drip irrigation, and getting up a little bit on the hill gives me, maybe I'm 20 feet in elevation above the garden. Now I've got, maybe 8 psi of water for the water, which is enough to run drip systems. It'll run a little slower than normal, but now I don't have to have electricity. So grid down, no problem. My chickens are watered, my garden's watered. Um, so going back to your question, I guess one of my big strengths is that I can see all these different uses for unique uses for things. And I actually have a whole class on how to use direct solar for basically for preparedness. So you can do communications with it. You can charge anything that's USB, which if you look into what runs off of USB-C, you can
Almost
run
everything, like so
almost,
many devices now. Yeah.
yeah, there's very, very little that you can't find. And so you might go, well, how am I going to heat myself with a solar panel in the middle of winter when the power's out? There's an answer for that, right? So the answer is you can charge up one of those power packs. USB power packs are about that big,
Yeah.
and you can run a heated blanket, heated jacket, heated hat, heated gloves, all off of those power packs. So you can charge the power pack during the day. And even if you can't heat your house, you've got a heated blanket, you've got a heated jacket, you've got heated insoles to your shoes, heated socks, heated gloves. Like, you can heat yourself or keep yourself warm. Or you could even, some of those packs, you can run a diesel heater off of those. So the diesel heater, if you've ever seen them, they'll run on a pretty small battery. They run at
Oh.
about 20 watts for the blower fans,
Oh. Okay.
about 300 watts on startup. So you have to have enough wattage temporarily. Um, but let's say you've got a lawnmower sitting around in the yard and you've got a diesel heater. You can connect your solar panel to to the lawnmower battery to your
Yeah.
diesel heater, and you can keep the diesel heater running all day and night in a complete power outage.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
so I guess the point is you can, if you look at the things that you have and what they have the potential to do, and then once you've kind of brainstormed about what the potential is, then think about, does it make sense to do it this way, or is there a better way to do it?
Okay.
Because you mentioned the PVC pipes for leafless gutter systems.
Yeah.
Well, there's nuance to that, right? So the way that I made them, and I do have a video, so if people want to go and see that, just go to my channel. Um, the way that I made them, you're going to have water that's still getting past the gutters. It doesn't all get into the gutters.
Yeah.
So if you've got a building like a house where you're trying to protect it from water getting onto the ground around the house, it's not a great system. But if you've got something that wouldn't otherwise have gutters and you want to collect water without getting leaves and other debris in it, it's a great system.
Yeah.
And then there's one more nuance to it. The next nuance is PVC is actually pretty expensive right now.
Mm,
And
I haven't priced it in a little while. Yeah.
yeah, so this is 4-inch PVC. a lot of homesteaders will have stuff like that sitting around. Um, I know somebody locally to the project I was working on that has like 8 or 9 sticks of 20-foot 4-inch PVC that's been sitting around for 20 years because they were going to use it on their septic and they never did.
Yeah.
Um, so I got it for free. So that's, there's the caveats and the nuance to when and why you should use it. So if you're going to go out to Lowe's and buy PVC middle of the pandemic when it was, I think it was something like $120 for one of those sticks of PVC or
Oh
something
wow.
just astronomically high. Well, you might as well get a regular gutter system and put it on and, put leaf guard on it or something. But um, if you can get it really cheap on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, now you've got an alternative and it's great because it keeps leaves out.
Right. Yeah, that inspired me because I've got these little outhouses that I would like to do some water collection so that it would bring in for like a little hand washing station for the little composting outhouses that I have. So I was like, okay, yeah, I like where Ryan's going with this here. This is pretty sweet.
So you must have something kind of similar to what I've already got set up then.
Very, very similar. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Very
Maybe a
similar.
little more like Nicole's, but do you have solar panels for them or anything?
For the outhouses, I have
Yeah.
a little 100-watt solar panel that I was thinking to affix to it, so that it would. Uh, I kind of went uh, and bought the Rolls Royce of composting toilets for out there because that was the plan is to host people out there and stuff. So
Yeah.
I got one of the Nature's Head little composting toilets out there, and it does have like a little thing that you can run it off of. You can run the little DC fan in there, and so yeah, that was the idea. That's the idea is to mount the little solar up there and run light, little light on a switch or something in there, and then have the little fan running off of that little panel.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll work. I didn't put a fan in mine because so I've got, I'm sure you've seen it, but for people who are listening or watching, um, I've got a whole bathroom, off-grid bathroom system that I built. Again, there's a video for that.
Hmm.
But it's got a heated shower using rainwater collection and a toilet. And the toilet's a really simple um, composting toilet is maybe generous. It's like a 5-gallon bucket toilet
Yeah.
with a nice bench, so it doesn't feel weird.
Yeah.
Um, but there's no real point in putting a fan in there because you cover it with carbon right away, and
Yeah.
so you don't get the smells of a more traditional toilet
Like
or
an
outhouse.
outhouse.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yep. And so there's something called the stack effect, meaning heat rises or convects upward. And so I designed the outhouse to have to use the stack effect. So as if it heats it all inside of it, that heat just rises up, and I've got air outlets at the top. So I don't think I really explained that in my video, which I probably should have, but
Mm.
I just after building it and thinking about putting fans in it, I realized it's always comfortable. You can go in on a 90-degree day and it actually still feels pretty comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have that set up. Is that for like if you have people over your property or something and they can go use the outdoor facilities if you have hosting people or something or
So the particular property where I built that, it's not my house. It's actually the property where I started doing homesteading and permaculture stuff for other people.
oh, okay.
And um the lady who owns the property we've been kind of trying to get it ready for when she retires and has a bit more time to put into it.
Hmm.
So I've been working on developing systems, maintaining systems, and the idea is we want to do hip camp and as well as like permaculture based classes or homesteading classes so we can invite people out to the property.
Yeah.
And it's pretty well divided right down the middle. So there's her house and kind of her property that she's always lived on, and then there's the part of the property that I restored maybe 6 years ago now that we've been working on the whole time, and that's kind of a demonstration site slash hip camp location. So we've got several campsites, plus people can bring campers in, or and we can host classes and workshops. I'll be doing a swale workshop in the spring, like how to do mini hand dug swales for your orchard. So
Oh,
anyways, it's out there, and the idea is we needed a bathroom that people could access that's not in the house or on the other side of the fence.
yeah.
And so that's what I came up with.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. And that's why it's got the water collection on it, because there's like not a running water, I guess, on the property.
Yeah. So part of it is, again, we're building things out to be a demonstration site.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I do have water on that property that's being pumped to the top of a hill.
Yeah.
And so I could rent a trencher and trench a line to so it's about 150 feet from my main line that's using the water system on the property. But I actually just it was cheaper and more interesting, I thought, to collect water off the roof and show how that can be done. And literally people could take the system, build their own, and they could move it around their property to wherever they wanted. So I kind
Uh,
of wanted to make it a demonstration item that could be replicated and used anywhere.
oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. So the research that you've done in going into the health realm, how did you find permaculture? How did that work its way? And was that part of the whole health thing that had to solve, was also running across permaculture, or how did you
N-
get into that?
Not initially. Um, so permaculture is something that I got introduced to maybe 10 years ago. So I kind of health wise, it's about 15 years ago. I had to make a big change. And then about 10 years ago, I think I started running across permaculture in a meaningful way. Um, Back then, I felt like a lot of what was out on permaculture was kind of like your basically it was a hippie movement, or what it looked like. So you go on YouTube and search permaculture, and it was like people rolling around in the mud, and I'm like, not really interested until
Ah,
I figured out what it actually was, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
is which is I mean, a design science is probably not the best um description of it, but um in designing, I think one of the things that always sticks out to me is this idea of function stacking.
okay,
And that's probably my strongest suit is, excuse me, figuring out how to um put disparate systems together, figure out how they can link, how they
yeah,
can be part of a bigger ecosystem,
okay,
and then also dealing with kind of highly technical things and tying those in and making them as simple as possible. So really, to me, I take all of the principles and the design ideas and things of permaculture, and I try to apply them in the most simple, practical way. And typically, that ends up as being some form of function stacking, is the generally the simplest way of explaining it. Um,
yeah,
but permaculture has so much more than just that. Um,
right,
it's just one of the most meaningful and impactful concepts that people overlook. And by that, I think we've been trained to, right? So in school or in life in general, on social media, there's right and wrong. It's always black and white. It's this thing or that thing. It's dichotomy. It's polarized. It's binary. It's ones and zeros, and that's how we're taught to look at the world. And so, if I were to try to explain to somebody why I have the belief system that I have, let's say politically, why I'm so opposed basically to any political authority in general.
Yeah.
I can't wrap that up in one reason. And that's
Mm.
because there's a lot of reasons. And if I say one reason, like if I start to explain it and I give a reason, I usually you'll get the objection of, well, that's not a good enough reason. It's like, I'm not done yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. But that's what people are conditioned to, is that it's, you know, one issue, one cause, one fix. Like that's how everything is in people's minds. And part of why I'm drawn to permaculture is that it kind of breaks that narrative
Mm.
because um I guess, like I'm saying, is we as people have been trained very intentionally to see things in a dichotomy, to see things as binary. It's either this or that. You're either on the right or the left. You're either, you know, you're an environmentalist, or, you think that people should have their, right to their own property. You're A or B. You either want to control people or you don't want to. Like, I'm trying to think how to explain it well, but basically, when you try to tell somebody why something should work a certain way or what your thought is on it, you get that pushback of, well, that's a stupid reason.
Mm.
And it's because people aren't trained to actually listen and understand a greater concept than the one reason or the other reason. And that's how we get trapped in these arguments, on some political side, or divided really, really specifically. And that's how we're kept from getting along with each other.
Yeah.
Don't listen to somebody's story because they're a fill in the blank term that puts somebody in a category that means you shouldn't listen to them or pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's complete and total garbage. Like,
Yeah.
I want to hear from people I don't agree with. I want to hear their opinions. And if I can't do that, like, what is my opinion? What is my opinion worth if I can't hear somebody else's who I don't agree with? And I don't even have to argue with them. The reality is I'm probably not going to convince them of anything, unless maybe I'm kind enough to them and decent enough to them that they want to hang out with me again, and they start to see that, whatever box they're told I'm supposed to be in, because I'm in some form of opposition to something that they believe, that maybe I'm not actually in that box. Maybe because I'm a Christian and I believe one thing is morally wrong doesn't mean that I think that you're a terrible person. You know, like, that's not your conviction. That's my conviction. And that's how I'm going to live my life. But I don't need to force that on you. And
Mm.
something about permaculture and this idea that there's an ecosystem, that there's one thing ties to another, and there's this greater web that creates strength,
Mm.
um, as opposed to, it's this or that.
Yeah.
I think just changes the mindset. It can change your mindset permanently and in a way that creates a lot more good in your life. Um, and I
I've
think
never
that,
I've never heard anybody describe it like that, but yeah, that's really good.
yeah, well, and you can put the principles of permaculture, y- you can apply them to so many different things. Like, I apply permaculture to my business all the time. I apply permaculture principles to raising my kids. One of the ways I've analogized it, because it is thinking of a child as like trying to think of the right term. Think of a child like undeveloped land, right?
Mm.
Um, I get that there may be some objections about how that sounds because you're like, oh, it's property. But a child is somebody that, like my child, I'm in charge of until they're old enough to take care of themselves. And when I'm thinking about a piece of property, what I'm going to be thinking about is like you can think of a piece of a property and go, "Oh, I should monocrop this. That'll get the most production out of it," right? I'll go
Yeah,
plant corn and I'll spray it with pesticides and herbicides, and it'll look really great because it'll be super green and I'll get lots of corn off of it every year. But what you realize is you're degrading that land. And to me, that's very much like thinking of a child and how we deal with, discipline and training and teaching and giving them the things they need. Am I pointing them towards something that when I walk away, it's going to be a matured system, more and more like every year, a little bit more ready to function without my input or
Hmm.
with less of my input? Because I realize, your kid turns 18, it doesn't mean don't have any input. But if your input was, I'm taking a tractor and a plow and a seeder and planting corn, GMO corn every year and spraying it to make sure there's no weeds. To me, that's like, spanking your kid for every slight misstep. They don't learn anything from that. They just, other than how to not misstep around you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
right. And so I'm taking these principles of function stacking, of, guilds, of realizing that, some properties should never have, tillage, and maybe all properties should never have tillage. Um, and realizing that each kid, like a piece of like a landscape, is unique. They're going to have unique needs. There's going to be unique challenges. If I go and till, if I were to go and plow the field next to me, or the pasture next to me, I would have what would look like the landscape of Mars within a year,
Yeah.
because it would all erode and all that would be left is red clay and rocks. There'd be, there'd be no growth essentially on it. Um, I think each kid has a unique personality, a unique ability to take on certain tasks. Um, and just like I wouldn't go and plant, I don't know, a chestnut tree in the middle of a marsh, you know,
Yeah.
but I might plant a willow tree in the middle of a marsh, and a willow tree has a lot of value.
Right.
And recognizing that value instead of going, "Wow, it's really disappointing that I can't plant a chestnut tree there," is important, because each kid is so unique and so beautiful and so perfectly made. And when we approach parenting and raising our kids with this kind of permaculture mindset, realizing that each kid is unique, realizing that there's these principles. And if you go look up David Holmgren's 12 principles and just kind of like study on them for a while, they're pretty simple. There's only 12 of them. And think about, like, how do I apply that principle not just to my garden, but to my kids? Um, so, uh, and I can do that. Like I said, I can do that with my business. I can do that with my finances. Um, I can do that inside my house with, how do I set things up long term to be more and more resilient, instead of always breaking down and always buying the cheapest or buying things that are, I can't afford, or um, how do I implement that to everything, is one of the things I think about in permaculture.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really like a systems way of thinking for resiliency and being anti-fragile.
Yeah, anti-fragile is probably the perfect word for it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, um, so when you consult with people, you said that when you do a consultation, you're going out to somebody's property, and how how does that how does one of your typical consultations run?
Well, oh, how does it go? Well, it starts out with the psychological eval.
Myers Briggs. Let's do a
Yeah.
Myers Briggs.
No, actually I think psychology is largely crap. But There's something to it. So anyways, I send out a questionnaire. So if I'm going to be working with somebody, I have a questionnaire, and it is actually built like I'll ask questions that sound kind of similar to see how they might get answered differently with a little bit different perspective. So I'm not actually psychologically evaluating anybody because I'm not in any way qualified to do such things. But um, I ask questions about, what are your goals? What does your property look like? I need information on that because I'm gonna look at it with all the various tools, which are actually, LiDAR, contours, other imaging, satellite, stuff like that. I can do a lot of homework before I even show up on site. So I'm gonna ask about that. I'm gonna ask about what your resources are, how much time you actually have to put into it, what your experience is homesteading, and then, kind of lead you through some goals and your purposes, which goals and purposes end up being different. But like, what are so I've got maybe 10 or 11 different, things that people can pick and rank as their purpose for doing this. So it can be things like, I want to make money from my homestead. Um, I want water security. I want physical security. You know, um, I want to get away from the hustle and bustle of my current life. Like, just basically, I have a way of kind of breaking down and understanding, and I've worked with enough people, whereas I see what people pick and what their focus is. It helps me, one, put that into practice for what they're actually wanting to do, and help them avoid things that would otherwise be, in their specific case, a big mistake, but might work great for somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, and help them do things that maximize their effort and cost
Hmm.
into whatever system they're working on. So that's where it all starts, is a questionnaire. And then from there, there's a few exceptions, but the vast majority of the time, what I want to do is actually step foot on your property with you. So in your case, if I did it for you, I'd send you the questionnaire, I'd get it back, I'd go over it, I'd look at your, all those tools online to get a good understanding of your property and see what you were looking for. And then I'd come out, and generally we spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours actually walking the property and looking at different things, talking about different things. Usually it's a bit of a drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
And so what I'll do is I'll take notes, what I think is important. And I'll also see, as you're there with somebody, you can kind of see the places where their mind goes. It starts thinking about that thing and almost getting like distracted on that. So I'll write that as a note, like, to fill in later. And so after the on-site consultation, I'll send out an email with kind of my bullet points, some links if needed, um, and a little bit further explanation, or maybe some videos if there's something where I've made a video that can help explain the thing to them more. And that does a couple of things. It gives me a record of what I thought was the most important from our time together, and it gives you a some further links to explore, some more information to think about, and something to look back on when you're trying to process through what we talked about.
Mm.
Um, and I give an hour of follow up. So if people want to give me a video call, or um, think through a specific thing that we talked about a little more after it's sunk in and they've slept on it, they have the option to do that. And then, generally speaking, there's two more things I do, if people want it. So you can stop right there. It's a lot, and my goal there is to save people money, time, headache, years off of doing things. If I can't save you money, I don't want to work with you, right? Like, if I can't save you more than I charge for the consultation. Um, if it makes sense for you, and I'll steer you away from this if it doesn't, I can do a design for the property. Um, the consultation itself, I try to keep really affordable. You know, it's I wouldn't call it a loss leader, but I try to keep it really affordable so that anybody can access that and get help. The design is where I make a little bit more money, and I spend several days putting that together. Um, I won't get into all the things that it contains, but basically you have a layout of how I think things should be set up on your property, and a pretty detailed explanation on how to do that step by step.
Okay.
And then finally, I will help some people set up systems, especially um, kind of either complex or unique systems that are designed for their property that others won't understand.
Hmm.
Um, but I do try to steer people towards common um, things that are commonly understood,
Yeah.
so that I'm not somebody who has to come out and then maintenance and service their stuff. Because my point is, I want to make them as resilient as possible. And if they're dependent on me to keep their systems going, then that's not a great design usually. So
Cool.
yeah, those are kind of the three. So consultation, design, and then implementation or support.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find, follow, support all your efforts that you have going on?
Well, primarily just go to my YouTube page and subscribe there. Watch through some videos, comment on them. That always helps me. Um, Beyond that, if people are really wanting to get in contact for a consult, or I do remote consults as well if needed, if you're too far away. Um, that information can all be found at the homesteadconsultant.com. And one more thing is I'm working on building out recommended projects or products on my website. So if you buy through those links, I get a little bit of a kickback, not much, but I put a lot of time into finding products that are really good for homesteaders. And I'm kind of just building that out slowly. So if you go under the affiliate section on my website, you can find products that I recommend.
Excellent, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and love everything that you're doing, Ryan. And yeah, let's stay in touch, and love to have you back on. And everybody, please like, subscribe, share this video around, and go follow and support Ryan and get a consultation from him.
Cool.
So
Thanks so much, Greg. And look forward to talking to you again. I'm sure we'll do another one sometime soon.
absolutely, man. Appreciate it so much. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next one, and we'll see you later.